Greetings and welcome to my channel. This is Sorcerer Tal. You can also find me on Facebook in the Sorcerers Guild. Today on Sorcerer's Shadow Volume 2, we're finally getting back to the Necromancy, and we're going to start with the group essay on the Tools of Necromancy. Let's get to exactly what the question was. It was, what tools do you use for necromancy? How do you make them? What do you use them for? Okay, now, we'll get to at the end, we'll get to everyone that commented on this particular essay, but there were some very interesting answers to these questions. Some are quite different than what I would answer myself. A lot of them talked about not using gold, silver, or salt when working with the dead. In my experience, that's more working with the spirits of decay, which is a very closely related thing to the dead, but it's not really what we're getting at. And I mentioned the nameless dead. They're one of the things that are on the edge of that, between decay and death. There's something a bit farther. It's a bit more, well, decomposed. And when we're dealing with those things, very much so, you want to avoid anything that's essentially microbial in nature. So you don't want to just avoid salt, any of your precious metals, because they have a microbial property to them. You also want to avoid using any type of alcohol with offerings to those types of beings or anything like that. But as I said, that's a little bit different thing than what we are actually talking about in this essay. Now, of course, the things that almost all of them talked about were vessels, which are commonly used as bones. There are other ways to use vessels besides bones. For me, I find that you need something with a cavity. Of course, the most commonly used would be a skull cavity. If you have access to things like a human skull or something like that, there are methods for using that type of skull for necromancy and using it as a vessel for many different types of spirits. I find that problematic myself. There's too much there. There are ways to wipe all that out, but it's problematic. If you have such a skull, I suggest working with whoever's skull was actually in the spirit. That being said, other people do use skulls to invoke in whatever spirit they are bringing in. In my own experience, I use either an animal skull from which the face has been removed and it has been completely purified and blanked. The reason that you're removing the face is essentially symbolic, but also to get rid of as much of the original cause spirit in the spirit as you can, because you don't want that interfering with what you have, because you need to be able to clean it out completely. And no matter what type of skull you're using, you want to clean it out completely. There are people that use synthetic skulls for this, like plastics, that sort of thing. I have not had any success using things made of polyresins or anything like that when it comes to necromancy. I have had some success with that in other areas with servitors and stuff like that, but for the dead, you need something organic. I have seen wooden skulls used quite well. Gourds. This is what I will often use, is a gourd. And we'll be talking more about those when we get to the ancestor work. I'll be showing you some of the bodhvis that I have used in the past. But a gourd works just fine. You're still going to want to clear it out, wash away the residual energy of the gourd itself, but it'll hold them in. You can also use an emptied eggshell. Anything that's organic, intended to hold in energy, like life force energy, and has a cavity inside for the spirit to possess, will work for that. Like I said, in my experience, the best thing to use is you get yourself an animal skull and you actually cut away the front part of the skull so there's nothing left but the cavity itself, and then you are going to blow smoke on it, all over it. Do not blow it directly into the skull cavity during this, because that's adding positive life force energy. You blow all over the outside with tobacco smoke, or you wave sage all over it, and then you do the thing with the selenite, which I have explained in the past about pushing energy through your body into the selenite and then pushing that out through visualization onto whatever it is you're trying to purify. We'll get more into that in later videos when we talk about banishing. But this is like an astral eraser. Selenite, because of its properties, it's very closely related to salt, but it is very much more receptive to the broadcasting of energy through it. It's almost like a natural fiber optic cable. Anyways, you get one of those and you imagine the energy from your chest, or if you've watched the belly fire videos, it's actually better to start with the belly fire. So from your belly, up into your chest, through your arms, into the selenite where it flows through and then comes out the other end as a white beam of cleansing energy that just destroys pretty much everything in its path. So you do want to be careful with using the selenite, especially if you're using that strong of a visualization. But there's more to it than just a visualization. There's an actual thing going on there, an actual pattern that you develop while pushing it through the selenite, and it'll erase all the energy. So that's how you get a skull prepared. Once you've done that, then you blow smoke into the skull itself and cleanse all that out, and it is ready for use. Okay, so other tools that you might need. One that I highly suggest along the same lines is a brass bell. You can, of course, make a brass bell if you have the skills, but just buy one. The bigger and louder, the better, in my opinion. And this is for banishing. This is your fire extinguisher in case of emergencies. This is something you're going to pick up and ring the heck out of if you're having trouble getting rid of a spirit. You ring it with the intent of banishing, and it has a certain vibration to it, the brass bell, that will break up astral energies if you push it out with the intent of getting rid of things, and it's just going to shush everything in the area away. It's not something that actually will destroy them, but it will push them out almost immediately. It disrupts the energy patterns. So again, in my opinion, this is the thing you want to be careful with. Some people use a silver bell and ring it before and after each working to clear the area. That's not the way I tend to work. And of course, if you're working with decay, you can't use the silver bell. Bronze has a little bit of microbial properties, but it should be fine. Bronze, or ideally brass, if you're working with the extremely low decayed energies. Okay, so let's see. What else do you need? Of course, you need candles, that sort of thing. But, in my opinion, the most important thing you can have when working with necromancy, and something we will have to discuss a little bit about how to make, is the knocker. Where I'm going to have a video a little bit later on talking about how to enter a graveyard, and this will feature prominently in that. But this is the most important tool in your necromancy toolkit, in my opinion. It must be made of wood. Has to be made of wood or some other organic material of that nature. I don't know what else I mean by other organic material of that nature, but like bamboo, that's technically wood. But either way, I prefer you to use a hardwood so that it is good and strong, and then it will be covered in bone at the end. This is specifically to be intended to wake the dead. You knock them up. Yeah? And this can be used at the cemetery. Like I said, we're going to be discussing that in a future video here in a couple weeks. Next, I believe we actually start talking about banishments and that sort of thing. But anyways, the knocker. It's very simple to make. You just need a piece of bone and place a piece of wood inside of it. Most bones are quite hollow, so you can literally just stick the wood in there and then tie it on. It's pretty important to use red, white, and black. Not absolutely necessary depending on what spirits you're using with, but if you're going to be dealing with grandmother or the crossroads spirits, that's their colors, red, white, and black. They like those. Okay, so if you're going to be creating a cause spirit or anything like that, a knocker can be used there as well. Actually, literally knocking on the skull to get the spirit's attention and stating your intent that you wish to speak with the dead. If you're using a cleared skull, that's exactly what you do. Knock on there, knock on the skull, state your intent that you wish to speak with the dead, and then call the name that you are seeking. We will get a little bit more into that in future episodes of this particular series. But that's the importance for now, because we're, like I said, right now we're mostly just talking about the tools. Guess we'll go ahead and sit that down. Okay, so let's see. What tools do I use that we haven't mentioned? I think we've pretty much covered them for the most part. There's, of course, different skulls that you use to make cause spirits. That's the necromancy that I work with the most, is invoking cause spirits into animals' skulls. And we will be talking about that as well in future episodes, but that is also a very important tool. One of my most famous, of course, is Boris with the Cash Cow sigil. Anyways, so I think that pretty much covers the tools that you actually need for necromancy. There's, of course, supplies, as in tobacco, rum, which in a lot of cases, Everclear is actually a better case than rum, a better offering than rum. By that I basically mean moonshine. The stronger the alcohol content, the better. Around here, you can buy at the liquor store. It's called Everclear. It's 180 proof. That's the stuff they like. Okay. Unless, of course, this spirit you're working with is a particular spirit that asks for something, or you know about a particular drink they enjoyed during life. Okay, so I think that's about it for the tools. This essay, the people that assisted with it were Dylan Z. Miller, Matt Treasure, AJ Adukal, Benjamin Cott, the one that says redacted, I know who that is, but I can't say because they didn't want their name in, Yvonne Undine, Edward Ayoub, I'm not really sure how to pronounce his name, Rachel Blackman, Sean McIntyre, Josh Kimball, Roderick McKinnon, Mark Fitzpatrick, Sean Batson Wagner, and myself, Sorcerer Tal. Okay, look at this real quick, see if there's any. Oh, I did forget one. And it's funny because in the essay I talk about it being one of the most commonly neglected tools. And that would be UV light. Originally, this was a spirit orb. You also hear about this in Druidic magic. That's the purple glass ball that was put in that a black candle was put inside, and it makes it look like there's a spirit floating in the middle of a jar. But more importantly, it creates ultraviolet light if done properly, and this allows light into an area without bringing in actual normal light that can. Especially if you're working with those decay spirits, you want to get some UV lights. You want to get some black lights, or if for some reason those bother you, the lights in a developer room will work just as well. But you want to get something like that because sunlight and even candlelight, that is just regular candlelight, is going to damage any of the decay spirits that you're working with and can harm even death spirits, regular dead. Candlelight, not so much. But you don't want to be turning on a bunch of lights or allowing sunlight into the room. Death, in a way, has to do with darkness. And so we don't want to bring in too much light. So UV lights, black lights, or camera developer lights are a great way to get around that. Okay, so let's see. The people that also, there's a few more people that contributed. Ade De Chow, Melissa Joy Shepard, Benjamin Cote, Tony Budrick, Durin Wayside, Rachel Blackman, I think I already mentioned her, Letitia Burfitt, Jennifer Lopez Gomez, and Sherry Eason. Okay, let me just make sure I was correct. Yes, next week we will be discussing banishing, and then the week after that we'll do a demonstration on it. Anyways, that's... book sliding all over the table wasn't even... Anyways, that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you once again for joining me. Actually, I do want to say that on Tuesday, we're going to be continuing the Weird Science Lab and start talking about self-hypnosis in conjunction with connecting with your higher self. And our first experiment with using magic to work with neurodivergence, because I've been doing an experiment with that and my own executive dysfunction. It's been working out quite well, actually. Anyways, that is it for this episode. If you've listened along this long, you might as well go ahead and give the episode a like. You clearly enjoyed it, or at least put up with us for this long. Anyways, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.